So, here's a wild true story from 2019 about my uncle's wife, Jenna, who got possessed by a female spirit one eerie night. Buckle up, y'all. Just a regular day in our lives. I got back from college, and that evening, I was off to a birthday party for my cousin's buddy. Our whole squad showed up. We ate our hearts out, and after the party wrapped up, we started our walk back home alongside another family from our building. As we neared our place, out of nowhere, my dad gets this call from his pal at around 11:35 p.m. going, "Hurry over. Something's up with Jenna. She's not recognizing anyone and is talking all sorts of weird." My dad jetted off to their house solo, and we headed home. Freaked out big time. Oh, and the fam had a daughter, Mia, 17 years old. A son, Liam, 12 years old. Their uncle, Grandpa Mike, and Grandma Ella at home that night. Soon after, a bunch of their close ones came over to tackle the situation. Around 8 p.m., we were glued to the TV. The usual routine. Mia was there with me, and Uncle and Grandpa Mike were out. Grandma Ella had just knocked out the day's chores and was about to hit the shower. Then, the lights go kaput. So Grandma Ella grabs a candle for the bathroom trip. She was heading to the terrace since that's where the bathroom is. Mia and I were just chilling, shooting the breeze with our phone lights on, when suddenly, we hear this scream. It was Grandma Ella. We bolted to the terrace and found her on the ground, spewing gibberish like she's plotting some scheme and laughing non-stop. We hauled her back to her room. Mia and I were trying to pin her down on the bed as she kept rambling on. The freakiest part, she kept begging to be led upstairs. Going, "Please, let me go. You do love me, right? Just let me go." Then, Uncle walks in, totally lost at the sight of her bizarre laughter. Uncle heads upstairs and fetches some incense from the prayer room. That kind that gives off a soothing vibe, kinda like incense sticks. Before stepping into the room, he lit the incense. He went in to grab Grandma Ella's phone to call Grandpa Mike since his phone was dead. On his way back down, he suddenly feels this chill, like someone's yanking his neck upwards against the wall. He spots this dark shadow, even makes out a face, but clams up whenever someone probes about it. Just snaps. Never bring that up with me again. He comes tearing down, chanting prayers, drenched in sweat, scared witless. We dialed up Grandpa Mike, and he hustled back. By 9:20 p.m., he arrives to see Grandma Ella cracking up like a loon and throwing insults. Who's this mutt's offspring? Seriously. She was spouting nonsense. Grandpa Mike was trying to piece it together, especially since Grandma Ella wasn't even recognizing her own kids. Grandpa Mike rings up all the close fam and friends, telling them to swing by. A crowd of about 7, 8 people, both men and women, show up, doling out prayer beads and chanting up a storm. Nothing sticks. Grandma Ella's still cackling, mocking our efforts, tossing insults like nobody's business. Hitting 12:50 a.m. With nothing working, we called in a spiritual healer, dubbed Eric, a lean dude known for his spirit dealings. He shows up, slightly thrown by the whole scene. He settles next to Grandma Ella, trying to get through to the spirit, asking, "Who are you? And what do you want?" She's like, "He's calling for me. Let me go. He's waiting up on the rooftop." Hinting there's some dude and a cat expecting her, still clueless about what that was about. Eric mumbles some chants, whispers in her ear, and she goes off on him before suddenly dozing off. Around 2:45 a.m., she wakes up, clueless. "Why's everyone here? Hold up. I'll whip up some tea." Acting as if the last few hours were a blank. Everyone crashed there that night, and the power flicked back on around 4 a.m. The next morning, she shares with her sister about this massive black cat she saw on a nearby roof right before her mind went dark. This cat kept growing, and so did its shadow, and she accidentally stepped on the shadow, which is when everything went blank for her. Fast forward to 2022. As Mia recounts this to me, I was right there, crashing at their place as part of a self-imposed quarantine. Day one back in town. That first night, I insisted on keeping the lights on, but only managed to catch a couple of hours of sleep, totally wrapped up in a blanket, sweating buckets. I ended up sleeping near the door of that very same room where it all happened. I could have easily spun this tale for some clicks and likes. But trust me, this is one of the most eerie, real-life horror stories I've come across in a long while. So, there you have it. A tale that sounds like it's straight out of a horror movie, but is as real as it gets. Right from the heart of a regular family, dealing with something utterly unexplainable. Just goes to show, the weirdest, most unsettling stories are sometimes hidden in the most ordinary places. Let's rewind to before my life flipped into something straight out of a thriller. It kicked off pretty harmless with my neighbor. This dude dead set on hitting it big online, ready to pull any stunt for a slice of fame. His wild schemes ranged from plain weird to straight up reckless, turning into more of an annoying quirk in our block. But then, things took a sharp left turn from the usual antics we'd shrugged off. He hit me up, all hyped about this epic move that was supposed to launch his Facebook fame sky high. Little did I know, saying yes to watch his place would drag me into a whirlwind of mysteries, scares, and a bone-chilling find that'd stick with me for life. Here's how my run-of-the-mill life got tangled in a tale so bizarre and grim. So, my neighbor was totally obsessed with getting famous, right? Chose Facebook as his fast track to stardom. But man, he was super annoying. Over 2 years, I saw him pull off some wild stunts. Like one time, he swallowed a whole spoonful of cinnamon and then threw up everything. And another time, he stripped down in the dead of winter to take a cold shower right in the street. Then one day, he knocks on my door, all excited, saying he's about to make this big, groundbreaking move in his Facebook career and asks me to wish him luck, keep an eye on his place till he gets back. He's apologizing, not even knowing that hearing I'd be rid of him for a bit was the best news I'd heard in a while. Thank God. The first couple of days were chill. Just the usual mail, bills, some magazines. I pick up his mail and bring it inside my house. But on the third day, there's this huge box right outside his door. A massive thing with really thick cardboard that made it look even bigger. I go to check it out, and it's just got my buddy's address on it. No other info. I'm pretty strong. Got a solid build. But damn, that box was heavy. Couldn't lift it. Tried dragging it over to my place through the alley, but it was too much. The box was too big to fit through my door, so I had no choice but to leave it in the garage, which was a whole issue because my garage door was busted, and I'd been too lazy to fix it. Normally, I'd park my car right out front to avoid dealing with the door, but now I had to fight with the darn thing. Managed to get the garage door half open after a few hits and tries. I was lifting the box to get it inside, and suddenly the garage door starts moving like it's gonna fall on me. I'm trying to hold it up. The box drops from my hands, and I hear something break inside. I'm just hoping it wasn't anything important. But even if my neighbor got mad or upset, I was ready to lie and say it came broken. Got the box inside the garage, shut the outside door, and just forgot about the whole thing. Don't know how many days went by before the smell started getting really bad. Like, there was this nasty stench coming from the garage, making my whole house reek. It was disgusting. I figured it was coming from the garage. Thought at first maybe it was some meat delivery gone bad since he'd signed up for this monthly meat thing from a butcher. And the meat spoiled because it was left out of the fridge. It legit smelled like rotten meat. So, I gear up with a mask and plug my nose. Decide to open the box thinking if it's spoiled meat, I'll just have to deal and toss it. Thought the smell couldn't get any worse. But man, was I wrong. The moment I opened the box, this wave of horrible smells hits me. Sweat, urine, feces, decay. I was so grossed out. I backed away and threw up. Threw up all over myself. Had to wash my face and mouth before I could even think about checking the box again. When I finally looked inside, I saw something I'll never forget. Something that'll haunt me for the rest of my life. Inside the box was my neighbor's dead body. I called the cops, and naturally, they took me in for questioning. Standard procedure. All signs pointed to me. All suspicions were around me. The only thing that cleared my name was his video camera that was with him in the box. The camera had a bunch of videos they let me watch just once after I insisted. The first video was him accepting a challenge from a follower to ship himself from one state to his home. The second video showed him inside the massive box, saying he'd prepared with enough food and drink for a week, plus empty bottles for peeing and containers for other needs. The box was big enough to move around in. In the third video, he explained how a friend would seal him in the box and send it off with a shipping company. The fourth video had him laughing inside the box, feeling the movement of the shipping truck. The fifth showed him still upbeat, enjoying the warm interior with plenty of supplies, determined to complete the challenge. The last video was him not knowing where he was, the box shaking while he filmed. Then a loud noise. The camera shakes and falls, continuing to record until the battery died. They told me his neck broke at that moment, and he died. The cause of his death is still unknown to everyone but me. Noise at the end of that video was the sound of my garage door. This revelation shocked and scared me. I realized the noise that caused the chaos, possibly breaking my neighbor's neck, was because of me trying to get that massive box into the garage. What started as a simple task turned into an absolute nightmare. After watching those videos, the whole story became clear to the detectives, and I was cleared of any charges. My neighbor had put himself in an incredibly dangerous situation in his quest for more views and fame on Facebook, and tragically, it ended in his death. This whole ordeal really made me think about the lengths people will go for fame, and the dangers of taking internet challenges too far. It highlighted the importance of safety and common sense when engaging in what might seem like fun online. Life in the neighborhood eventually went back to normal, but the dark memory of what happened will stick with me forever. The tragedy that befell my neighbor serves as a harsh reminder that the pursuit of fame and entertainment should never compromise safety and responsibility. As I move forward, I vow to remember this story as a cautionary tale for future generations about the risks involved with internet challenges and the obsession with fame. It's like you see these stunts on Reddit, and everyone's getting a kick out of them, but you never really think about how it could all go sideways until it happens close to home. My neighbor's death was a wake-up call to the reality that not all attention is good attention, and sometimes trying to go viral can have irreversible consequences. I found myself alone, working the night shift at an old, abandoned textile factory on the city's outskirts. The looming storm added an eerie atmosphere to the factory, which was once a bustling industrial landmark, now silent and desolate. As I monitored the quiet, the anticipation of rain hung heavy in the air, but the downpour hadn't started. Strange sounds began to break through the stillness of the night. Sounds of knocking on the windows and scratching on the outer walls. Initially, I was used to the odd noises old buildings make, but these sounds seemed deliberate. Deciding to check the surveillance cameras for peace of mind, I was startled to see a man standing on the sidewalk opposite the factory. He was wearing a long coat and a hat that obscured much of his face, standing perfectly still, gazing at the factory, or perhaps directly at me. At first, I thought he might be seeking shelter in anticipation of the coming rain. But the absence of rain and his unmoving stance raised my anxiety. An hour later, upon checking the cameras again, he was still there. This time holding a sign that read, "I know what you're doing," despite no rain falling to justify his continued presence or the ominous message he held. Confused and increasingly frightened, I decided to confront him. I took my flashlight and cautiously headed outside, only to find the sidewalk empty. The man vanished as if he was never there, leaving behind an unsettling mystery and a silent, rainless night. Returning inside, the factory felt more claustrophobic than ever. The night dragged on with a suffocating tension, culminating when I spotted him once again on the camera, this time brandishing something that looked ominously like a knife. The phone rang, breaking the silence with its jarring tone, and a voice that knew my name issued a chilling warning. "Stop watching me. I'm watching you too," before abruptly ending the call. The encounter left me with more questions than answers, haunted by the man's knowledge of my name and his unnerving surveillance. In the weeks that followed, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. A constant reminder of that night's terror. It taught me that some mysteries are better left unsolved, as the shadows may hold more than just darkness. On a sweltering summer day, Nathan, decided to isolate myself from the hustle and bustle of daily life and work pressures. I chose to spend my vacation in a simple cabin nestled in the embrace of a dense and remote forest. The cabin had been in my family for generations, and although it was seldom used, it was the perfect refuge to escape into nature. As soon as I arrived, I was enveloped by a profound peace with every breath of the forest's fresh air. However, this feeling didn't last long. It wasn't long before I started to feel something outside the cabin disrupting this peace. Something I couldn't quite identify yet. On the first night, as I was preparing to sleep, I heard light footsteps circling the cabin. Initially, I thought they were just small animals roaming the forest, but I quickly realized that these footsteps were regular and intentional, as if someone was prowling around the place. Gathering my courage, I decided to check it out. When I opened the door, no one was there, but a sense of unease began to seep into me. I went back inside and locked the door tightly, trying to ignore the growing anxiety within me. The next morning, while having breakfast, I noticed something strange. There were wet footprints on the cabin floor, leading from the front door into the room where I had been sleeping. This confirmed that someone indeed had been there, inside the cabin, while I was deep asleep. Panic took over, and I realized I had to confront the situation. I decided to check the entire cabin to make sure I was alone. As I searched every nook and cranny, I heard a faint sound coming from the attic. It was the sound of someone breathing heavily, as if trying not to be heard. With my heart nearly leaping out of my chest, I climbed up to the attic, where I found a man standing in the dark, wearing tattered clothes, looking at me with cold, calculating eyes. The man seemed like he had spent days, perhaps weeks, in this dark place. Hiding inside the cabin I thought was my safe haven. Before I could say a word, the man began to speak in a rough, broken voice. You don't know what you've brought with you to this place." His words were vague and laden with threat, heightening the horror I was already living. I tried to maintain my composure and asked him what he meant, but he ignored my question and slowly advanced towards me. Every step he took increased my heart rate. I stood frozen, unable to move, until he was very close. Then, he started whispering words I couldn't understand, as if it were a warning or a curse. At that moment, I heard the sound of feet running towards the attic. It was my friend Jake, who had grown worried after I didn't respond to his calls and decided to come and check on me. Seeing him, the mysterious man retreated into the shadows and vanished in the blink of an eye, leaving behind an atmosphere of mystery and fear. Jake and I searched the attic and the entire cabin for any trace of the man, but to no avail. He had completely disappeared, as if he had never been there at all. After this incident, I couldn't stay in the cabin a moment longer. I packed my belongings and left with Jake back to the city, laden with unanswered questions and a heart pounding with terrifying memories I will never forget. Never. My name's Danny. I was 18 years old and decided to embark on an unforgettable adventure with my two friends, Sam and Tommy, during spring break. Instead of heading to the beach like the rest of our peers, we chose to explore the wilderness and spend a night in an old cabin inherited by Sam's grandfather, hidden deep within the forest. Upon arrival, the cabin looked less majestic than we imagined. The wooden planks were worn, and the doors creaked with every gust of wind. A sense of isolation and antiquity enveloped the place, but little did we know, this night would turn into a real nightmare. After exploring the area and setting up a fire pit, we sat exchanging stories and enjoying the tranquility, until the silence was pierced by heavy footsteps approaching the cabin. Initially, I thought it might be an animal, but the sound was too heavy, like human steps. We tried to ignore it and enjoy the rest of the night, but I couldn't shake off my anxiety. As we prepared to sleep, I noticed someone watching us from between the trees. They wore a long coat. I couldn't see their face due to the pitch darkness. I alerted Sam and Tommy, and we decided to check it out together. But by the time we got outside, the person had vanished. There was no sign of them, except for mysterious footprints leading into the woods. We decided to stay awake, watching the shadows. At midnight, we heard knocks on the cabin door. 3 slow, deliberate taps. When we opened the door, nobody was there. Just a folded note under the doormat that read, "Leave. This isn't your place." Fear gripped our hearts. We tried to call the police, but our phones had no signal. We stayed awake until dawn, huddled around the fire, watching for any movement. With the first light, we decided to leave the cabin and head back to the city. But before we could get the car moving, we discovered its tires had been punctured, and another note was stuck on the windshield saying, "I told you to leave." We were trapped, with no way to escape. Walking through the forest was risky, but staying was even more dangerous. We decided to take the risk and walk to the nearest main road, armed with flashlights and anything that could offer protection. Walking through the forest was exhausting and terrifying. Every step increased our tension, and we jumped at the slightest sound. After long hours of tense walking, we finally reached the main road where we managed to stop a passing car and explain our situation. The police immediately went to investigate the cabin and the surrounding area. They didn't find anyone, but they discovered evidence that someone had been living there in the wilderness, hiding from all eyes. We returned to our normal lives. But that night changed something inside us. We became more cautious and appreciative of the safety we enjoy in our daily lives. The forest, with all its beauty and tranquility, also harbored dark and dangerous aspects. That story left us with a lesson. Nature, in all its grandeur, also holds secrets we might never want to discover. In 1987 the house I was renting was a murder house. Nothing to do with this story, but yes, I rented a murder house for a while. The people in the story are myself, Laika, and my best friend, Joe. Anyway, on with the story. I'd been living in the murder house around 4 months with no issues. Apart from me and Joe constantly pranking each other. Me and Joe were still working as station supervisors on the London Underground. Anyways, we were great friends. We both 100% mutually friend-zoned each other from the start. And we both shared a love of pranks. Sure, they got a little out of hand sometimes, but kept us both on our toes. At 26, Joe was almost 7 years older than me, and the only issue I had was that he would take my stuff sometimes. For instance, if I bought a pizza and put it in the fridge for when I got home from work, I'd come home, open the fridge, and see a note saying, "Laika, I took the pizza. Here's pound 20, buy another one." And there would be a pound 20 paper clip to the note he'd written in the fridge. He did it with everything, mostly when he'd had a few beers. He once drank a quarter bottle of brandy I'd been saving, and I was so mad I'd punched him, right in the arm as hard as I could. Joe had just laughed, and he had the kind of laugh that made me laugh too. Both of us never really took anything seriously for more than a minute. Anyway, the next time I bought brandy, I put the bottle in the drawer under my bed so he couldn't get it. I'd gone to bed and was sleeping when suddenly I was woken up by my bed moving. Joe was in my room, a little drunk, and he was as carefully as a big clumsy drunk could be, opening the drawer to get at my brandy. He saw me open my eyes and started laughing. "Shh, just sleep," he mumbled. "I'm just here for the brandy." Somehow I managed to restrain myself from breaking the bottle over his big drunk head. I handed him the bottle with a tired narky, "Just F King take it and FK off," and he took it from me and stumbled out of my room. The next night I shut and locked my bedroom door while I slept. I told him never to come in my room and wake me again like that. A couple of nights later, I was woken up by the sound of someone jiggling my door handle. Screw Joe, I thought. The door was locked so he couldn't get in. I ignored him for a while, hoping he would give up. But the door handle kept squeaking and moving. I very quietly crept out of my bed and put my hand on the lock. I was planning on carefully unsnicking it, then wrenching the door open and throwing myself at an unsuspecting Joe screaming like a banshee. It would be so funny. I silently stifled a giggle. I remained deathly silent. It wouldn't work if he heard me unlock and open the door. I had one hand on the little lock ready to twist it, and the other hand on the handle. I counted in my head, 3, 2, 1. And right then, I had a little thought that I was tired and didn't want to prank Joe after all. I'd go back to bed and pretend to be asleep, and eventually he would stop fiddling with my door handle. So that's what I did. I got back in my warm bed and went off to sleep. I was woken by Joe some hours later. "Laika," he shouted, knocking on my door. "Come out of your room really carefully and don't freak out. Don't touch anything. I've already called the police." He sounded different to how he usually sounded. I carefully unlocked my door and slowly opened it. I looked outside of my room and noticed that every knife we had in the house was on the floor outside my room, arranged in a semicircle facing my door. We both liked to cook and had 2 sets of deadly sharp chef's knives and a set of steak knives, and yeah, we had a lot of knives. And right now they were all on the landing carpet pointing directly at my bedroom door. I asked Joe if he heard anything, and if it was him trying to get in my room around 1 a.m. He looked at me wide-eyed and told me that he hadn't even been home all night. His shift had finished at 11 p.m., and the night foreman hadn't shown up for his shift, so Joe had volunteered to stay and do a double shift. He'd finished around 6 a.m., arrived home to find a downstairs window had been forced open, and lots of things moved around. The police arrived and weren't even that bothered because no one was hurt, and nothing had been taken, and nothing, apart from the lock on the window, was damaged. But tons of things around the house were moved around, and the way they were moved was like in weird shapes and patterns. I shudder when I think of what would have happened if I would have wrenched the door open thinking it was Joe. Years and years ago, when I was young, foolish, and in college, I decided to visit a friend over Christmas break. I borrowed my father's truck for the journey. Well, I had a timetable I was going by because a winter storm was coming in, and I needed to drive the 3 hours home before that storm hit. I started back home with what I thought was plenty of time, but I had not checked the new weather report. That winter storm came in hard and fast while I was driving, with snow and ice. I was terrified. Also, I was driving with no weight in the back of the truck. This was the 1980s, and that Ford had a light rear end. I began to shimmy with the hard winds that were blowing. I was on a back highway that no one else was on. I knew a small town was a few miles up the road, so I thought I would pull off there until the worst passed through. The road was super icy when suddenly, a huge wind blasted me. I fishtailed and suddenly flew off a 10-foot embankment, crashing through a field, ending up about 300 feet off the highway, stopped by a fence that kept me from going into a creek. I was in shock but not hurt, turning off the truck and grabbing my purse. It took me about 15 minutes to get back onto the highway. By that time, I realized that about a foot of snow had fallen in that short period and was still coming down hard. I was in a very rural area, very alone. No one was on that highway, and I knew the town was about 4 miles down the road. The wind was so cold, and I was terrified. I buckled down emotionally to prepare for the cold hike. I wondered if the truck was okay. I worried if I was going to be okay, wearing a light coat. Suddenly, I saw 2 headlights heading towards me. The car slowly came up to me. 2 men, one middle-aged who was driving and one elderly gent, were in the vehicle. The driver said excitedly to the passenger, "I told you, I was right." As I got in their car and they turned around to head toward the town I was hiking to, the driver, who had picked up his father to take him to his house to ride out the really bad winter storm, said that he had been really focused on driving in this bad weather. He didn't think anyone was behind him, and I certainly did not see him in front of me with how heavy the snowfall was going. However, he glanced in his rearview mirror. With that glance, he thought he saw a truck go flying off the road. His father scoffed at him. They debated it for a couple of minutes, but the man was so sure something was wrong. He turned around to check it out despite his father's protests. They drove back and, to their surprise, found a 19-year-old scared female college student. The man, my hero. Still after all these years, gently told, crying me that my truck was so far off the road that it would be hard to get it out. I needed a big tow truck for that, and this was a very rural area. He would take me into town to the gas station, but I should not get my hopes up. At the town, I tearfully called my dad because I was still about 1.5 hours from home. He said that he would start heading to the town, but not to worry. My hero explained my situation to the guy running the station and quickly took off to get home as the weather was still bad. The station guy then looked at me and said something to the effect of, "Oh, you're in luck. He's back early." And before my eyes, the biggest, brightest tow truck pulled up. The tow guy listened to my story, and we headed back to the accident. He looked at the truck and said that it would not be easy. But, yep, he could winch it straight out. I helped him haul the tow chain down and hook it all up. And slowly, that truck was pulled out of that field. We looked at it and realized that the foot of snow that had come down while I was driving acted as a cushion when I went off the road. There was no damage to the truck, and bushes by the fence stopped any front-end damage. I followed the tow truck back to the station and waited for my dad, who showed up with my little sister. He was shocked there was no damage, as the tow guy verified my story about the accident. So, some big luck here. The split second of the guy seeing me go off the road in his rearview mirror and then deciding to check it out. And the big tow truck. Physical injuries from the accident. And last, no truck damage. My dad got me my own car a short time after that. I guess to protect his truck. I look back on that day and realize how wrong things could have gone. If I had gone into the creek, no one could have seen me from the highway. If that guy had not looked up at the right time and went against his father's thoughts that it was nothing, I would have had a long, cold walk. If I had been hurt and not able to get to the highway, that guy may not have seen the truck from the highway and just turned around and take his father home. So much pure luck. It was midnight when I decided to log into my Binance crypto platform account to check on my digital wallet. That moment changed my life forever. I found a mysterious message in my inbox on the platform. The message contained a clear threat, demanding a significant amount of cryptocurrency in exchange for keeping my wallet and personal information safe. At first, I thought it was just a regular scam attempt. I quickly discovered it was far more serious than I had imagined. I started receiving repeated threatening messages, each more detailed and specific than the last, as if the sender knew everything about me. I realized then that I was facing a formidable opponent. I began looking for solutions to avoid falling victim to this threat. I tried reaching out to Binance customer support, but all my attempts were in vain, as I received no significant response. Despair started creeping in with every hour that passed without a solution. My life turned into a continuous nightmare. I feared losing all the digital currency I had accumulated over the years. I felt watched all the time, as if every move I made was being recorded by this unknown threat. There was no escape from this terrible situation. Every attempt to rid myself of this threat ended in failure, as if I was facing a ghost that couldn't be caught. Amid this dire situation, I began to wonder about my fate and what could happen if this threat continued. Fear dominated every moment of my life. I lost the ability to concentrate at work, and my social relationships rapidly deteriorated. Every passing moment increased the tension and anxiety I felt. There was no light at the end of the tunnel, and it felt like I was stuck in a never-ending nightmare. In a desperate attempt to escape this predicament, I decided to report the threats I was receiving. However, the response I got was disappointing. They told me that without concrete evidence of the threatener's real identity or location, it was difficult for them to take any action. The feeling of helplessness grew inside me, as if I was completely alone in facing this danger. One night, as I tried to find any possible way to protect myself and my digital wallet, the lights in my house started flickering unnaturally before going out completely, leaving me in total darkness. As I groped my way around in the dark looking for a candle or a flashlight, I heard slow, intermittent knocking on the front door. Each knock sent chills down my spine, heightening my sense that danger was now at my doorstep. I decided to ignore the knocks, hoping it was just my imagination fueled by intense fear. But the knocks turned into violent banging, as if someone was trying to break down the door. In the pitch darkness, I felt something moving slowly in the living room, like the sound of light but heavy footsteps getting closer. At that moment of terror, I remembered my phone was in my pocket. I quickly pulled it out, trying to use its light to dispel the darkness. But it was completely dead, even though I was sure it had been fully charged just a few hours earlier. The sense of isolation and despair was suffocating. I realized my threatener had managed to instill terror in me without even confronting me directly. Standing there, paralyzed with fear in the dark living room, the sounds and banging continued, each increasing my sense that my end was near. My mind raced with horrific thoughts of what might happen if the threatener managed to enter the house. At that moment, terror reached its peak, and there was nowhere to run or hide. I was utterly alone, with danger surrounding me from every side. Suddenly, the violent knocking on the door stopped, and an eerie silence took over. A silence more unsettling than any sound I'd heard before. The calm carried an electrified tension, as if danger was lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. In that dark, silent moment, I heard the sound of an incoming email on my mobile phone, which surprised me because I was certain the phone had died. Somehow, it had turned back on, with a faint and hesitant light from the phone's screen. I opened the email to find a new message from the threatener. This time, it wasn't a text message but a video. With trembling hands, I played the video, which showed footage from inside my house, showing me standing in the living room, frozen in fear. The video was filmed from a corner of the room, meaning the threatener was indeed here with me in the house, watching me without my knowledge. I felt a chill run through my veins, and terror escalated to levels I never thought I would experience. The video carried a clear message. There was no safe place, and there was no escaping this nightmare. The threatener was playing a sophisticated game, controlling every move and knowing every step I took. In that moment of desperation, I realized that I needed to do more than just contact the police, try to escape. I had to confront this danger directly to regain control of my life and safety. I started to devise a plan to uncover the identity of the threatener and end this threat once and for all. I knew the path would not be easy, and every step could be fraught with danger. After long nights of continuous work and research, I began to see a light at the end of the tunnel. I managed to identify some email addresses and locations used by the threatener to send messages. With each piece of new information, I felt one step closer to solving the puzzle. Meanwhile, I had to protect myself and ensure the threatener could not harm me or my loved ones. I began to strengthen the security of my home, installing surveillance cameras and alarm systems. All this was done in complete silence, as I did not want the threatener to know I was on their trail. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I gathered information pointing to the identity of the threatener. The shock was staggering. The threatener turned out to be someone I trusted, someone from my social circle. The motive behind their actions was a complex mix of jealousy, desire for control, and greed for my digital wallet. Armed with this information, I decided to confront the threatener face to face, but in a safe way. I arranged a meeting in a public place, surrounded by people, under the guise of security. The look on their face when they saw me was a mix of shock and fear. I revealed everything I knew and how I was ready to take legal action if necessary. The confrontation was tense, but ultimately led to my victory. The threatener, faced with the facts and evidence I presented, collapsed and confessed to everything. They apologized for the harm caused, driven by desperation and greed. But the matter did not end there. I insisted on them being held accountable for their actions in front of the law. They were handed over to the authorities with all the evidence I had collected. The legal process was long and exhausting, but justice eventually prevailed. Throughout this period, I learned a lot about the value of digital security and the importance of being cautious about who we trust with our personal and financial information. I also learned that courage is not about not feeling fear, but facing what scares us with wisdom and determination. After the case was closed, I decided to use my experience to help others protect themselves from digital threats. I started giving workshops and seminars on digital security, sharing my story as a live example of the dangers of the digital world and how to counter them. Going through such an experience was a radical transformation in my life. I no longer felt dominated by fear as before. Instead, those events became a driving force for me to be stronger, more cautious, and aware of the world around me. I realized that no matter how big and scary the challenges, willpower and determination can turn darkness into light and fear into strength. And so, I reclaimed my life anew, with a valuable lesson I'll never forget. Security does not come from avoiding danger, but from the ability to face and overcome it. Heed my story. This is a dark, sad story. I was a normal man until I read an email. The day started normally. I came home after a long day at work. All I wanted was to play some video games. When I saw I got an email from a random person, I didn't think much of it until I read the header. It said, "Want to hear a scary story that will keep you up all night?" I don't usually read spam emails, but I was bored and thought it may be fun to read. The story was about a man that keeps hearing a tapping sound around his home. He looked all day for it, but couldn't find it. That night, when he was laying down, the noise got louder. It was so loud he couldn't sleep. This keeps going for days and days until one day, he lost his mind. He grabbed a shotgun and started shooting everywhere he thought it was coming from. After he shot all his shells, he slumped down against the wall. He started laughing, not hearing anything. Thinking he was free from the sound, he went to bed, hoping he could get some sleep after days without it. When he closed his eyes, he started to hear the tapping sound again, right next to his head. When he opened his eyes, he saw something in the dark before letting out a scream. As I finished the story, I shook my head, thinking to myself, that was a weird story, but not thinking much after that. I started to play some games when I thought I heard a tap behind me. I turned around to see nothing but the dark. Maybe that story did scare me a little more than I thought. Realizing what time it was, I got up from my desk and went to the kitchen to make some food before bed. I opened my cabinet to find a pack of ramen, the only thing that kept me alive since I got out of college. The entire time I was making my ramen, I felt uneasy. I felt like I was being watched. Someone breathing down my neck. Every time I turned around, there was nothing there. I thought it was still the story messing with my mind. After eating my dinner, I walked around my home, locking all the doors and windows to make me feel at ease. When I was done locking everything up, I laid down to sleep. After some time, I got woke up by a loud tapping sound. My eyes shot open, but my body wouldn't move, no matter how hard I tried. Then the tapping sound started again, this time right next to me. I know I had to look to see if it was just my mind being scared. I gave it all my strength. I rolled myself over to see something I cannot even begin to understand. It was like a thing from nightmares, something that cannot be of this world. After seeing it, all I could do was shut my eyes. I hoped with everything it would just go away and I would be safe. After what felt like an eternity, my clock went off, hoping it would be gone now that the sun was up. I opened my eyes. It was no longer there. I sat up in my bed, hoping that it was just a dream. Looking around, I didn't see anything. It all seemed like a dream. My computer made a sound, letting me know I have an email. Getting up, I walked over to it and saw an email, the header saying, "Thank you." Clicked on it, and my eyes opened up wide to what I was reading. "Thank you for reading my story last night. I hope it was to your liking. I hope I didn't scare you too much. I just was so excited that someone read it. Just had to come see you. I looked up and over to a mirror hanging on my bedroom door to see the monster from last night standing right behind me, with a smile on its face, frozen in fear. I looked back at the email. The last line read, "I hope you don't mind, but I have a hard time not tapping my fingers on things when I'm happy." Just as I read that, I heard the sound of tapping, let out a scream of terror.